Namaste, welcome to Perseverance IAS. These are the important articles to be read in the newspaper, the Hindu newspaper for July 3rd, 2021. The first article that you have to read is LET could be behind drone attack in Jammu, says DGP. Again, this is just an information article, nothing important or significance in terms of both prelims or mains. The next article is again similar, nothing is important in terms of prelims or mains. All you have to understand is be aware of what is going on in the second article, that is the India flag sighting of drone over mission in Pak. Now the second article that you have to read that is important for today is goods export touch record 95 billion in quarter 1. So three things from this article. What is quarter 1? What are the sectors that this article is talking about? And why they are important, and again why are they not important too? Because remember, in any growth market, manufacturing sector is the critical component, but in this article we talk about only exports in particularly gems and jewelry. We talk about it petroleum products, but petroleum does not run our economy, so you have to think in that terms too. So moving on to the next article, I suggest you read No Stage to Perform, Street Artists Take Up Odd Jobs, because art is an important component of the society and culture. I think this would give you a perspective or an example in ethics paper. So I humbly suggest you read this article too to understand what they are going through. So in terms of city, Cant act against NGO for not submitting returns. Center told. Again, this is an informative article. What are they trying to do? What are the tax provisions regarding to non-governmental organizations? What are FCRA rule or what are FCR rules? Please do read this article from that perspective, and that is why this article is of a little bit importance and significance. Moving on, I think this is the most important article that one can read today, because it might be a question in state level examinations, because this talks about a significant point of time where archaeologists who were excavating a particular site in Odisha, particularly Balsore district, discovered traces of three cultural phases, that is Chalcolithic age, Iron age and early historic period. That is why this site is important, and you have to read this about this site and why it is significant. So tensions at Sri Salem, Nagarjun Sagar, again you have to read this article from the perspective of water tribunals and why they are important. What is the current issue between Telangana and Andhra Pradesh, which were used to be united but no longer united. So moving on to the next article, editorial in centenary backdrop, there is no hand of peace. Again, this article is important to understand the Chinese point of thinking and Chinese dynamics. Again, unjust green, which is an important article to understand why the green pass is an issue and why should push back against such discriminatory tactics by other countries towards India or any other developing or poor nation. So the next article is rural power solutions, even other states can emulate. This is a Rajasthan centric article, but nonetheless the idea is good and can be used as a potential ways to reduce our energy dependence on fuels. So the next article that you have to talk about is in Atlas. Again, this is in terms of digital divide in educational system, and that article is important to get a bearing as to what is the current issue and why India needs a better understanding in investing in infrastructure, particularly modern infrastructures in schools and colleges across India. Now, as far as this op-ed is concerned, I suggest you simply skip it because it's not worth it. The next article you have to read in page 8 is just judges must look at facts of a case and its human aspect. Again, this is just a perspective, nothing of significance here there. House panel awaits a state service on learning loss. Again, this is an important article to understand what is the parliamentary function bodies are doing and why they are significant. Moving on to the next article, center asks states to impose limit on stocking of pulses. So this article is important because the amendment order that the government of India gave it recently to prescribe the limits upon which storage can be maintained on critical pulses or any other feeds or whatever you call it, but this article is important to understand why the order is being given and why it is significant. So moving on to the next article, China has improved its air operations. Again, this is important because we have to understand how advanced and fast are the Chinese in incorporating infrastructure in their defense posture. The second thing that you have to understand from this article is there is a lot of difference between operating armored forces operating from the Chinese side and armored forces operating in Indian side. Look at the CDS versus Air Chief Marshal statements today. What has happened regarding the theater commands? So there is a necessity to read this article and understand why we are different, or why our armored forces are different from the armored forces of the Chinese, and how they have been very fast in implementing critical infrastructure while we are still lagging behind. That is why this article becomes important. Attack using drones aimed at IAF assets is again significant because of the recent drone attack on Jammu Technical Airport. Now, Denmark steps in to provide AstraZeneca jabs to Bhutan. You have to understand this from the perspective of, to get an update as to what is the situation in Bhutan and which countries are trying to help it. So, moving on to the next article, estimate of 216 crore vaccine doses was aspirational. This is VK Pal, who has been entrusted with the job of tracking and formulating a policy for vaccination in India. So his statements do carry a lot of meaning and significance to understand what is the current thinking behind government policies in regards to vaccination, and we get an update as to what is the rollout plan of government of India to vaccinate all of its population. So moving on to the next article, voices against taxes by NSC and grow stronger. Again, this is a northeastern point of view. You have to understand these kinds of groups have been a problem to government of India and its population. So getting a pushback against this organization from the people themselves will certainly help central government in maintaining law and order and getting these people out of power in certain parts of northeast. So from that point of view, you have to read on what is NSC and groups, why they are, what are these taxes that this article is talking about, why people pushing back against such organizations, such terrorist groups in India is a significant steps towards weeding out such organizations in northeastern states. So the next article we have to read is J&J jab creates more antibodies against Delta variant than Beta. The reason that I chose this article is the study that they are talking about is based on 8 people. So whenever you are quoting a study, or whenever you are answering an answer using the data from a study, please look into the number of patients that is being done on, because 8 is not a good number to base your study results on. So I suggest you be careful in quoting studies. Moving on to the next article, that is world. I forgot to highlight those articles, but the first I highlighted those articles. So after 2 decades, US exits key Afghan base again. In understand where is Bagram airfield on geopolitical map, meaning map of the world, and why Bagram Air Force has been important, and why after 20 years this is being done. So from that perspective, you have to read this article. Israel strikes Hamas site in Gaza over fire balloons. Again, understand the current scenario between Gaza terrorist groups and Israel government, and from that perspective you have to read this article. Pandemic increased vulnerability to human trafficking, US report. What is this report? Who is giving it? Why are they which countries are they talking about, and what are the points this report is making? That is important. So you have to read this to quote certain sections of this article in a future answer that you may or may not get, but nonetheless, to get a quote out of this report, you need to study this article. Mali responds to India's letter on media attacks. This article is significant because recently we were reading about how Indian government diplomats has officially protested certain sections of reporting from Maldives press corps or press, and you have to understand from that perspective. So this article is important. The next article that you have to read is US issues moratorium on death penalty at federal level. This is again in regards to death penalty. India has death penalty, US also has death penalty, but they are trying to do away with it. And India might soon follow a similar path, but nothing is set in stone. So to get an understanding of what is the global consensus on awarding death penalty to criminals, you have to read this article. In business, 2 articles, but the third is also significant. But the 2 important articles that you have to read is India sees consensus by October on OECD G20 global tax deal. What is global tax deals? What is OECD G20 grouping? What is the framework that we are talking about here? What is the percentage of tax? Why it is significant? Is it helpful to India or not? If it is helpful to India, how so? If not, also how it is not helpful to India. From that perspective, you have to get all these points from this article and learn more basing out of this article. It is significant in terms of aligning Indian economy with Western countries. Get that in mind. Moving on to the next article. This is regarding big tech's push into financial sector poses risk, says RBI. You have to understand what risks they are talking about, why it is so risky for these companies to get into the financial sector in India, and you have to understand what is this financial stability report that RBI comes out with every year. So moving on to the next article, Forex reserves surge by 5 billion to 609 billion. By 5 billion to 609 billion. So understand this, where is this money coming from, how this is significant, what are FCA assets or foreign currency assets, how they are important and how they are not so great barometer or bar to measure our foreign reserves. So you have to also link this article with how forex reserves are important for economy and how they aid or sometimes negate economic growth in a country. These are the important articles to be read in the newspaper, Hindu newspaper, for July 3rd, 2021. Thank you. Stay safe. Namaste.